You're listening to Tim Bulkeley's 5-Minute Bible.
Genre in the Bible. Part 1. Introducing genre. Since this is an introduction, it'll be fairly basic, so some of you may want to skip this and go on to the next one. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. In this podcast, I'm going to start looking at the concept of genre, and we'll notice that a library has books of all sorts of different kinds, and that we call these different kinds or sorts of literature genre, and that different genre of literature need to be used differently. And then finally we'll notice that the library that makes up the Bible has books of loads of different kinds, loads of different genre. So that's today's episode. But for a start, let's begin by noticing that a library, almost any library, has books of different sorts in it. Not all the books in the library are of the same kind. There are fiction books and non-fiction books, to use the biggest distinction in most public libraries in New Zealand. And among fiction books there are detective stories, science fiction or fantasy, and then among non-fiction there are cookbooks and travel guides, and these different kinds of books are different kinds of books. You wouldn't go to a book like this for the same kind of reason that you'd go to a book like this. And you wouldn't look at a book like this for the same reason as a book like this. Now, all these different kinds of book have different purposes and different functions and work differently. We call these different kinds of literature genre. It's a French word and it's hard to say. We've kind of adopted it because the English word sort or kind doesn't really sound scholarly. Oh, just to make things more complicated, in French we don't pronounce the S on the plural of genre. I've no idea whether we should do or shouldn't do in English. When you're writing it, you probably should. And these different genres of writing get used differently. Take the cookbooks and travel guides we talked about earlier. Both cookbooks and travel guides may well talk about curries. But you wouldn't go to the Lonely Planet book on Tibet or India for curry recipes. And you wouldn't go to Edmund's cookery book for details of which places to stay in Bangkok. Similarly, workshop manuals and books about advertising may both have pictures of cars in them. But you wouldn't get a book about advertising in order to get details of how to adjust your carburetor. The books have different functions, and they work differently. And it's the same with almost any set of genre you care to name, though of course the closer they are, the more similarly they'll work. So, libraries have books of different sorts. We call those sorts of literature genre. Different genre need to be used differently. And the Bible has books of loads of different genres. History, songs, poems, instruction, letters, visions, worship, preaching, philosophy, and loads more. Even songs, there are worship songs, there are love songs, there are even, here and there, little bits of work songs. There's all sorts of songs. Here's a very rough and ready division of the Bible into different sorts of literature. There's history, there's poetry, there's wisdom, there's prophecy. There's history in the New Testament. There are letters, we call them epistles. And there's stuff we call apocalyptic, like the book of Revelation. Daniel's another example of that genre. But we'll get to that in more detail when we get to discussing some of these genres in particular. Next time, I'll be thinking about prose and poetry, one big distinction between two major kinds of genre in the Bible. And we might get a little bit technical and talk about whether or not such a distinction is real, and if so, how it's real. So if this one was a real beginning introduction, the next one will get quite technical and detailed. Bye for now.